Hey, it's Adam Sewell, MD. Welcome to Module 3. In Module 1, we built the foundation. We discussed physiology, barrier function, mucosal immunity, and the microbiome as a functional organ. In Module 2, we translated that into clinical triage. We organized symptom patterns into buckets and clarified when stool testing is likely to add value. In Module 3, we are going to get technical and practical. This module is about what comprehensive stool testing actually measures, how it differs from standard stool studies, and how to use these tools responsibly. If you do this well, stool testing becomes a structured extension of your clinical reasoning. If you do this poorly, it becomes expensive noise that leads to over-treatment and patient confusion. My goal is to make you fluent enough that you can order a test for a clear clinical question, interpret the report efficiently, and convert results into a rational plan. Let's start with a concept that will guide everything we do. A stool test is not a diagnosis. A stool test is a data set. The skill is deciding when that data set is likely to change management and then knowing how to interpret it without overreach. Now let's begin with standard stool studies and why they often fall short in chronic or complex cases. In conventional clinical practice, stool testing is typically ordered to answer a narrow set of questions. Is there an acute bacterial pathogen that grows on culture? Is there a toxin-mediated infection such as C. difficile? Is there visible blood or occult blood? Is there evidence of ova and parasites on microscopy? Sometimes we include fecal calprotectin to assess inflammation, and those tests are appropriate in many situations. But here's the limitation. Many chronic presentations are not explained by a single organism grown on a basic culture. Many relevant organisms are anaerobic and are not captured well by routine culture methods. Many protozoa are missed on single sample microscopy due to intermittent shedding. And standard testing generally does not quantify beneficial microbiota, does not map microbiome balance, and does not assess digestive function markers in a comprehensive way. So when a patient has persistent symptoms, negative standard testing, and an ongoing quality of life problem, you can end up in a gray zone. That gray zone is where comprehensive stool testing can be useful. Now let's define what I mean by comprehensive stool testing. Comprehensive stool testing is designed to evaluate multiple domains of gastrointestinal health in a single report. Those domains usually include microbial detection, microbiome balance, inflammatory and immune markers, digestive function markers, and sometimes permeability-related markers and metabolic byproducts. Think of it as a structured attempt to answer a larger question. What is happening in this patient's gastrointestinal ecosystem that might explain symptoms and guide a targeted intervention? Now let's walk through the major domains one by one. Domain 1 is pathogens. This includes bacterial pathogens, protozoa, parasites, and sometimes viruses. In comprehensive panels, pathogen detection is often performed with molecular methods that detect microbial DNA. This can be more sensitive than culture, especially for organisms that are difficult to grow. The clinical value of pathogen detection is straightforward. If you find a treatable pathogen that matches the clinical picture, you can change the patient's trajectory, but you still need to interpret results in context. Detection does not automatically equal disease. Some organisms are true pathogens, some are opportunists, and some are debated in terms of clinical significance. You will learn how to navigate that in later modules. Domain 2 is commensal and beneficial microbiota. Most comprehensive panels quantify or at least report key beneficial organisms and patterns. This matters because the microbiome is not just about what is present, it is about balance and function. Low levels of beneficial bacteria, low diversity patterns, and overrepresentation of opportunists can correlate with symptom patterns, immune activation, and poor resilience after stressors like antibiotics. The clinical value here is not to chase perfection. The clinical value is to identify a pattern that supports a rational plan, such as microbiome repletion, dietary fiber strategy, or targeted antimicrobial therapy when indicated. Domain 3 is inflammation. This is one of the most important safety domains. Markers like fecal calprotectin and sometimes lactoferrin reflect intestinal inflammatory activity. If these markers are significantly elevated, your differential shifts toward inflammatory bowel disease, infectious colitis, and other inflammatory pathologies. In that setting, your priority is appropriate conventional workup and referral as indicated. Comprehensive stool testing should help you triage this not distract you from it. Domain 4 is immune tone. Many panels include secretory immunoglobulin A, which reflects mucosal immune activity. Low levels can be associated with impaired mucosal defense, chronic stress physiology, or immune depletion states. High levels can reflect immune activation driven by antigens, dysbiosis, or infection. Some panels include additional immune-related markers, such as anti-gliadin immune signals or eosinophil-related markers. The clinical value is to understand whether the gut immune system looks suppressed, reactive, or inflamed, and then connect that back to symptoms. Domain 5 is digestion and absorption. This is where comprehensive stool testing can be surprisingly high yield. Markers like pancreatic elastase can reflect exocrine pancreatic enzyme output. Markers of stool fat and other digestion indicators can suggest maldigestion or malabsorption. If you identify digestive insufficiency, that changes treatment. It can justify enzyme replacement, bile support strategies, and nutrition-focused intervention. This domain is often overlooked when clinicians focus only on pathogens and probiotics. Domain 6 is metabolic byproducts and microbial enzymes. Some panels report short-chain fatty acids or markers linked to fermentation. Some report enzymes like beta-glucuronidase, which is involved in deconjugation processes and can influence hormone and toxin recycling through enterohepatic circulation. This domain is more interpretive, and you should be cautious. The clinical value is usually in patterns, not in single numbers. These findings may support a broader plan around fiber, microbiome balance, and detoxification-related strategies, but they are rarely urgent and should not drive aggressive treatment in isolation. Now that you understand what is measured, we need to discuss how these tests measure it. That matters because methodology affects what a result means. There are three major methodological approaches you will see: molecular detection, culture-based testing, and immunoassay or biochemical marker testing. Molecular detection typically means polymerase chain reaction-based detection of microbial DNA. The advantage is sensitivity and speed. The limitation is that DNA detection does not always confirm live organisms, and it does not always quantify functional activity. Culture-based testing grows organisms and can allow sensitivity testing. The advantage is you can sometimes see susceptibility patterns. The limitation is that culture does not capture the full anaerobic ecosystem well, and results are dependent on growth conditions. Immunoassays and biochemical markers measure things like calprotectin, secretory immunoglobulin A, pancreatic elastase, and stool fats. These markers often map more directly to physiologic function and inflammation. So when you interpret a report, you should always ask a simple question. Is this marker telling me about a microbe, or is it telling me about host physiology? Those are different kinds of information. Now we are going to talk about the three platforms in this course and how to think about choosing among them. The first platform is GI Map. GI Map is heavily oriented around molecular detection of microbes, including pathogens and commensals, along with several key host markers such as calprotectin, secretory immunoglobulin A, pancreatic elastase, and other markers depending on the version. In practice, GI Map is often selected when the clinician wants a broad molecular view of pathogens and dysbiosis patterns, and wants a manageable report that supports clinical decisions. The second platform is Vibrant Wellness Gut Panels, often referred to as Gut Zoomer. These panels tend to be broad, with a large number of analytes and an emphasis on a comprehensive ecosystem snapshot, sometimes including permeability-related signals and extended marker sets. In practice, these panels are often selected when the clinician wants breadth and is prepared to synthesize a larger report into a focused plan. The third platform is Doctors' Data Gastrointestinal Testing, which may include panels that integrate molecular detection with culture and additional functional markers. In practice, this can be useful when you want a combined approach, sometimes including culture-based sensitivity information and additional indices summarizing dysbiosis. Now, I am going to be very direct. There is no universally best test. There is the right test for your clinical question, your patient, and your ability to interpret and act on the result. If you are not going to use a piece of information in management, then you should not order the test solely to obtain it. So let's make test selection practical. If your primary question is whether there is a treatable pathogen that has been missed, you want strong pathogen detection. If your primary question is whether there is a dysbiosis pattern that supports a structured microbiome plan, You want a report that characterizes commensals and opportunists in a clinically interpretable way. If your primary question is whether digestion is impaired, you want markers like pancreatic elastase and malabsorption indicators. If your primary question is whether inflammatory activity changes your triage, you want calprotectin and related inflammation markers. Those are the action drivers. The test is a means, not the goal. Now we need to cover pre-analytic considerations, meaning how to get a clean specimen and a reliable result. Comprehensive stool testing is only as useful as the sample quality and the clinical context. You should instruct patients to collect the sample exactly as directed by the kit. They should avoid contaminating the sample with urine or toilet water. They should follow shipping instructions closely. Now let's address a common question. Do medications affect these tests? Yes, antibiotics can alter microbial composition and suppress detection of organisms. Probiotics can alter the measured microbiome pattern. Bismuth, antiparasitic medications, and antimicrobial herbs can alter detection. Proton pump inhibitors can shift microbial patterns upstream and contribute to dysbiosis signals. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs can influence inflammation markers. So in practice, you want to document key exposures, recent antibiotics, recent travel, recent gastrointestinal illness, chronic proton pump inhibitor use, recent steroid exposure, and the current use of probiotics and antimicrobials. You may choose to pause certain agents before testing depending on the clinical scenario and your goal. If your goal is to see what the ecosystem looks like under current conditions, you might test without pausing. If your goal is to detect organisms that may be suppressed by antimicrobials, you may consider an appropriate washout period. The key is consistency and clarity. Document what the patient was taking when the sample was collected. Now let's discuss what not to do. Do not order a comprehensive stool test as a substitute for urgent evaluation when alarm features are present. Do not order a comprehensive panel and then treat every abnormal line item. Do not treat an isolated organism finding when the patient is asymptomatic and there is no supportive pattern. And do not use a stool test to justify a diagnosis that the test cannot make. Your credibility with patients and your outcomes depend on disciplined interpretation. Now I want to give you a workflow you can use in practice. Step 1 is patient selection. You choose patients where you have a clear clinical question and where additional gut data is likely to change management. Common examples include chronic symptoms that did not resolve with first-line care, recurrent symptoms after antibiotics, mixed gut and systemic symptoms with suspected gut contribution, and cases where you want to triage inflammation versus functional patterns. Step 2 is clinical framing. You define the question in one sentence. Is there evidence of intestinal inflammation? Is there a treatable pathogen? Is digestion impaired? Is there a dysbiosis pattern that supports a structured plan? Step 3 is test selection. You choose the platform that best answers the question in a way you can act on. Step 4 is interpretation triage. You always read the report in the same order. First, you check inflammation markers and safety signals. Second, you check true pathogens. Third, you check digestion markers. Fourth, you check immune tone markers. Fifth, you interpret dysbiosis patterns and opportunists. This prevents you from getting lost in the details. Step 5 is sequencing. You do not treat everything at once. You prioritize what is most likely driving symptoms, treat in phases, and reassess. This is how you avoid overwhelming patients. Now let's anchor this with a fictional case. A 46-year-old woman presents with 12 months of bloating, loose stools, and fatigue. She reports that symptoms began after an antibiotic course. She has no weight loss, no blood in stool, and no nocturnal diarrhea. A basic stool culture was negative. A basic ova and parasite exam was negative. She has tried a low fermentable carbohydrate diet with partial improvement. Here is the one-sentence clinical question. Is there a treatable pathogen or a clear dysbiosis pattern that explains persistent symptoms and changes management? In this scenario, a comprehensive stool panel can be reasonable because the patient has chronic symptoms, a plausible disruption event, an incomplete response to initial management. You document her exposures, you select a test aligned with your question, and you plan in advance how you will interpret it. That last part matters. You should never order a test without deciding how you will respond to likely result patterns. Now let's discuss interpretation pitfalls because this is where clinicians either become excellent or they become chaotic. Pitfall 1 is treating reference ranges as absolute truth. Reference ranges are based on populations and methodologies. They are not always optimized for your patient's symptom pattern. The correct approach is to look for coherent patterns that match clinical presentation. Pitfall 2 is assuming detection equals disease. Molecular testing detects DNA. That is useful, but it requires context. Pitfall 3 is ignoring the host markers. Many clinicians go straight to the microbe list and miss the most actionable findings, such as elevated calprotectin or low pancreatic elastase. Pitfall 4 is treating everything at once. When you do that, you cannot tell what worked. You increase side effects and you reduce adherence. The better approach is to prioritize, sequence, and reassess. Now we will close with 2 mini cases that highlight how stool testing is used responsibly. Mini case 1. A 33-year-old man presents with 4 months of diarrhea, urgency, and abdominal pain. He reports waking at night to stool, and he has lost weight. In this case, your primary question is inflammation versus infection, and your priority is conventional triage. If stool testing is used, it is targeted to inflammation markers and pathogens, and it should not delay referral. Mini case 2. A 58-year-old woman presents with years of bloating, fatigue, and nutrient deficiencies. She reports bulky stools and difficulty gaining weight. In this case, your primary question is digestion and absorption. A comprehensive stool test that includes pancreatic elastase and malabsorption indicators can directly change management because enzyme replacement and nutrition interventions are actionable. These cases illustrate the principle. You choose testing because it answers a question that changes what you do next. Now let's summarize Module 3. Standard stool testing is useful, but limited for chronic and complex cases. Comprehensive stool testing expands what you can see by evaluating pathogens, microbiome balance, inflammation, immune tone, digestion, and metabolic patterns. Methodology matters. Molecular detection, culture-based approaches, and host markers each provide different information. Test selection should be driven by your clinical question and your plan for action. Interpretation should follow a consistent triage order, starting with safety and inflammation, then pathogens, then digestion, then immune tone, and finally dysbiosis patterns. And treatment should be sequenced, not reactive. In the next module, we will start the platform deep dives. We will begin with GI map. I will teach you how to read the report efficiently, what the major sections mean, how to interpret common patterns, and how to translate findings into a rational plan without over-treatment. All right, that concludes Module 3. Let's move to Module 4, GI map interpretation and clinical application.